Our boy is in a bad situation, and at that point, he recalls Zhou Sihe saying in his novel The Dwarf that the people who live in heaven have no need to think about those who live in hell, which our boy believes was the correct thing to say. But he wonders what it would be like if he were the person who was dropped into hell and now thinks of heaven every second. As he is wondering about that, our boy sees a screen in front of him, telling him to see it to the end, but he does not understand why he has to do that and eventually falls asleep. After some time, our boy notices that someone is calling Shinhian and remembers that he went by the name Shinhian. The voice was telling our boy to not wake his sister Yuniel up until they reached their house, because she would bother our boy a lot. Our boy realized that he was once again seeing the dream about the night when he was heading home with his family and they suddenly got hit by a truck. Shinhian did not remember anything that happened after that and had no idea how much time had passed. Our boy also did not see his family around, and when he woke up in a place that looked like a cave, it had already been years. In the cave, the book about the heavenly martial origin cultivation art was given to him, and there was a message that told Shinhian to see things to the end if he wanted to go home. Shinhian wondered if he would be able to go back to his family if he were to master all that is written in the book. Our boy, clinging to a sliver of hope, our boy decided to give it a shot and completely mastered everything written in the book, on which the system congratulated our boy for completing the tutorial. Shinhian was overjoyed when he finished the tutorial because it meant he could finally meet his family, but then a door appeared, reminding him that the place he had arrived was not the end of the world. Rather, it was just the beginning, as he could see a city as he stood on the cliff in front of the cave. Shinhian cursed the system for making him do this for 10 years and wondered what he had to do to see the end of the world. But as he was wondering, a frail guy appeared in front of Shinhian with a knife, who found Shinhian's clothes to be strange. The frail guy told Shinhian that he found him because of his voice and asked if he could have some of his flesh for his family that was starving to death. Shinhian somehow managed to kill the frail man with the knife he was holding and wondered if he did the right thing, questioning whether it was truly self-defense. Shinhian started to justify his actions, and as our boy was thinking about that, the system notified him about his external art that has leveled up, which confused the already shocked Shinhian, as he found it strange to level up upon killing someone. However, after some time, Shinhian realized what he needs to do and concludes that in order to return to his original world, he has to reach the max level. A lot of time passes and Shinhian is seen pointing at his and the demonic cult leader's neck, asking him about the generation of demonic cult he leads. Shinhian realizes that it must be the 8th generation since the ones that died by his hands were the 6th and 7th generations. Our boy is quite amazed at them for they always come back looking for him every couple decades. The 8th generation demonic cult leader is scared of Shinhian, who is now the Supreme Sword Emperor and is not able to even move a hair in front of him. Our boy sees him helpless and slices his head off his neck, killing the demonic cult leader in an instant. One of the demonic cult followers charges at Shinhian for killing his leader and calls our boy a demon, to which our boy responds that a demonic cult follower has no right to say that. The demonic cult follower attacks our boy. However, our boy manages to dodge it easily and grabs the head of the demonic cult follower, which renders him immovable. The demonic cult follower is not able to control his body the way he wants, while Shinhian, instead of killing the follower, hypnotizes him and tells him to return after learning new demonic arts no matter how long it takes, for he is now the next demonic cult leader. Our boy has been keeping him entertained for 140 years by creating and destroying demonic cult leaders. However, he now seems bored by this. Our boy wonders how he should entertain himself from now on, because the demonic cult leader this time was not as strong as well, and after much thought, concludes that he should just create an evil sect with supreme martial masters. One cannot blame Shinhian for getting bored, for it has been 140 years since he has been living in this place, and everything that could become dull has become dull with time, to the point that our boy, who had started with the resolve to see the world's end, cannot even remember the faces of his family members. To Shinhian, heaven is a place that has never existed in his life, as he has spent his entire life living a hellish life, which he has had enough of and has decided to end everything. However, as he is about to end everything, Shinhian receives a system message, which congratulates him on achieving the highest level, because of which the final level deity Ascension restriction has been lifted from him, and the system informs Shinhian that he is now allowed to return to the Earth. Our boy starts laughing after seeing this message, wondering if the system pitied him because he gave up or if it was scorning him. Shinhian is taken aback by the mention of deity Ascension and wonders if it means he has attained the status of a deity, which is also strange, because if Shinhian has become a deity, he should be free of his carnal desires, but instead, he is filled with emotions he has never felt before. Shinhian thinks that his family would probably be dead already since so much time has passed, and he had also lost the will to go back to his original world a long time ago. So to him, revenge towards the person who turned him into this state is all that is left for him. Our boy vows to kill everyone who put him into this state, no matter where they are, and will make sure to give them a gruesome death fitting of their crime. Following that, the Supreme Sword Emperor, Cha Shinhian, returns to Earth after 140 years in the Murim. The scene then shifts to the year 2011 on Earth, before Cha Shinhian got into an accident, where a blonde tells mankind to evolve, for the days where nightmares will come are not far away. So in order to fight against those nightmares, the humans must not let the blessings that are bestowed upon them go to waste. The scene then again shifts to a man who has chains all over his face and is interested in Shinhian's arrival to Earth. The lady was not lying about the nightmares, for a man is being chased by a horde of monster wolves in the red of Korea, when team leader Cha Yunseal kills a few wolves with her archer skill strong arrow. Yunseal is glad for not being too late and tells his subordinate, who is just about to become dinner for wolves, to make haste and get out of here. The subordinate, who goes by the name Byongu, thanks Yunseal for saving her. However, he was not even able to move when a monster wolf comes out of nowhere and tears his shoulder off from his body. But Byongu is not the only one who is facing this situation, as everyone in Yunseal's team is being attacked by the monster wolves. Yunseal does not see any way to save her teammates from this situation, because there is no end to these monster wolves. Moreover, her MP is also about to end, and if this continues, then Yunseal's next meeting would be with the god. Yunseal notices that one of her teammates, who goes by the name Seo Junghian, tries to save his life by baiting Yunseal, which puts her in a pinch, as she gets totally surrounded by the monster wolves. The scene then shifts to Junghian, who is running for his life away from the wolves, thinking that he made a mistake by forming a party with these people, who Junghian believes are just like insects, and thinks that he would just end up dying like them if he stays on the battlefield any longer. However, as Junghian is about to reach the dungeon gate, Yunseal's arrow comes flying in front of him. Yunseal is furious to see Junghian sacrifice the whole squad just to save his life, but Junghian tries to fool Yunseal by expressing his happiness on seeing Yunseal alive, telling Yunseal that she should listen to him, as he is being misunderstood here. However, Yunseal does not believe Junghian's words and grabs him by the collar, telling Junghian that he was warned about the dangers of the battlefield. Yunseal screams at Junghian, telling him that their entire team died as a result of his incompetence and selfishness. However, Junghian believes he did nothing wrong, as he prioritizes saving himself in these situations, even if it means betraying his teammates. Yunseal remembers the disgusting character of Junghian and realizes that there is no use talking to a piece of garbage, asking Junghian whether his father, who is always covering for him, would be able to turn a blind eye to this incident after they get back to Dawn. Junghian gets agitated upon the mention of his father and uses his fighter skill Stone Crusher to punch Yunseal in the stomach, which sends her flying towards the tree. Yunseal is knocked out by Junghian's punch, and Junghian walks towards her and grabs her by the hair, telling her that she should not have messed with him because she has not even mastered the basics. Junghian mocks Yunseal for getting on a high horse after hearing everyone's praise, and he gives the unconscious Yunseal a chance to make a name for herself. Junghian intends to tell the media how team leader Yunseal became a distraction to the mission because she was solely focused on achieving the goals, resulting in the annihilation of the entire team and the failure of the dungeon raid. Junghian then decides to end this and prepares to attack Yunseal again with his skill, thanking Yunseal for her hard work. But as Junghian is about to attack her, a lightning bolt hits the ground, which surprises Junghian, and he forgets about attacking Yunseal for a moment. The source of the lightning bolt is none other than our boy, who manages to return to Earth after reaching max levels in both internal art and external art. Shinhian realizes that he has finally returned to Earth and hysterically laughs over the nasty hobby of the system after he realizes that the reason he returned to Earth was because he hit the max level in the other world. Shinhian vows to kill whoever is behind it. However, Junghyun gets irritated by Shinhian's nonsense, as he is shouting about revenge out of nowhere. Junghyun judges that Shinhian teleported to this place out of nowhere and asks him if he is a sorcerer, because in that case, Shinhian should mention the people he is affiliated with. But instead of answering Junghyun's question, our boy straight up ignores him, which infuriates Junghyun. Shinhian walks towards Yunseal, whom he believes is in her current condition because of the deathmatch, and concludes that she will soon die. Shinhian seeing Junghyun with Yunseal creates a bit of problem for Junghyun, because he worries that Shinhian might end up telling the truth to the world. So Junghyun concludes that he should deal with Shinhian as fast as he can. Junghyun tells Shinhian that they were just enjoying their deathmatch and suggests he quietly return to where he came from, because if he does not, then there would be consequences. Shinhian, who is not paying any kind of attention to Junghyun, concludes that the girl who is unconscious is his sister because she is wearing a necklace that once belonged to his sister, while Junghyun, on the other hand, tries to attack Shinhian. However, in that very moment, a huge amount of dangerous energy emanates from Shinhian, which overpowers Junghyun's energy in an instant. Shinhian finally gives Junghyun his undivided attention, telling Junghyun that there is no way he would not recognize his own sister, and informs Junghyun that he is the Supreme Sword Emperor, Cha Shinhian. However, this information now does not mean anything to poor Junghyun, because our boy erases him from the face of the world in an instant, telling the world that he is the older brother of Cha Yunseal. The scene then shifts to the point when Yunseal was a kid and once kept throwing tantrums for spending more time in the amusement park. Our boy warned to leave Yunseal behind if she continued behaving this way, as it was about to get dark, and if they stayed longer, then they would be making things difficult for their parents. However, Yunseal did not want to go home because there was no knowing if Yunseal would be able to spend time with her brother after her brother got busy in his studies because of his university. Our boy assured Yunseal that he would come by often to see her because he cared about Yunseal a lot and promised Yunseal to take her to the amusement park whenever they would meet. Yunseal agreed to her brother's proposal and decided to go home, asking him to give her a piggyback ride to the car, which Shinhian felt he should do more of before his sister gained weight. However, Shinhian was not able to fulfill his promise, because it was the very day when Yunseal lost both of her parents and noticed that her brother Shinhian had vanished. Yunseal always blamed herself for the demise of her parents, thinking that everyone would still be together if she had been less stubborn and had not kept pestering them to go to the amusement park. The scene then shifts to Yunseal, who wakes up after remembering about the day of the accident, when she lost her whole family. Yunseal experiences a lot of pain after waking up, which our boy believes is due to her severe injuries, telling Yunseal that it would be hard for her to move right away, even though Shinhian has almost treated Yunseal with his ki. Yunseal does not recognize her brother, which is something Shinhian was already expecting, and instead of answering Yunseal's question, he tells her that he would not be able to give her piggyback rides anymore, and it is not because Yunseal has become heavy, but rather she is all grown up. From this conversation, Yunseal realizes that the person sitting right in front of him, grabbing her hand, is none other than her brother, who gifted her the pendant, telling Yunseal to be courageous even when her brother is away and vanished on the day of the accident. Yunseal breaks into tears, asking Shinhian where he was this whole time, but then suddenly remembers about Junghyun and asks Shinhian about him, to which our boy responds that if Yunseal is asking about the one who attacked her, then he killed him. Yunseal gets shocked after seeing the corpse of Junghyun lying in the middle of the crater formed by Shinhian's blast and instantly grabs Shinhian's hand, telling him that they have to escape out of this area right this instant. The scene then shifts to our boy, who is leisurely walking in the house he used to live in and notices that despite after a decade passing, nothing in his house has changed, while Yunseal, on the other hand, is scared of director Seo Kang-jin, for he is going to come for their head. Yunseal tells our boy that Seo Kang-jin is the director of the Dawn Guild and father of Junghyun, who was killed by Shinhian. Yunseal further informs Shinhian that Kang-jin used to be a member of a gang and is still infamous for being violent and ruthless, and things get worse when one realizes that he is one of the 11 high-ranked hunters in Korea. Yunseol believes that Seo Kang-jin would have heard about the death of his son by now and is going to suspect her since Yunseol is not only the sole survivor of the raid, but is also way past the time to report the situation because she was unconscious. However, our boy does not believe that it is that great of a problem because he is the supreme sword emperor Cha Shinhian, so killing someone like Seo Kang-jin would be a piece of cake for him. Yunseol pinches her brother's cheeks for saying something impossible because Seo Kang-jin is over level 50, which is the reason he landed the executive position, and tells our boy that his title is ridiculous. Yunseol becomes enraged by Shinhian's title and mocks his manner of speaking, questioning why her brother is exhibiting symptoms of a severe case of 8th grade syndrome despite having been away for 14 years. Yunseol tells our boy that it has been difficult for her to live alone for so long, without the support of her parents and her only brother, who vanished. Yunseol then asks our boy where he's been all these years and why he decided to show up now. Our boy notices that Yunseol is more concerned about his title and way of speaking than Seo Kang-jin, and after realizing that his parents have passed away, responds to his sister that he was in a place called Murim this whole time, which is the reason behind his weird way of speaking. Shinhian then tells Yunseol that because he has been away for more than a decade, he needs to be updated on the things that have happened so far, such as the existence of hunters and the guilds, and whether this world also has the concept of levels. However, after listening to Shinhian, Yunseol feels as if her head is about to explode, as she does not know where she should start from. So she tells our boy that they will talk about the details later. As for now, she needs to take care of urgent matters. Yunseol tells our boy that she is going to the Dawn Guild, and she will be back soon, so Shinhian should stay where he is and not take a step out of the house. Shinhian roams the house and walks into one of the rooms, which he finds to be the same as if he was there yesterday. However, what has changed is his sister Yunseol, as she has grown stronger in that long time she has spent alone. So our boy thinks that he should be the good older brother that he was not able to be for all these years, wondering if he should deal with Seo Kang-jin first. As our boy is wondering about that, he hears a loud bang at the entrance of his house, so he rushes towards the entrance, only to find out a group of people who are looking for his sister. The one who entered Shinhian's house is none other than Seo Kang-jin, who is the director of the Dawn Guild, and is here to meet Cha Yunseol. The scene then shifts to Yunseol, who is standing outside the head office of the Dawn Guild, which is the second-generation guild of South Korea. Yunseol is curious if Seo Kang-jin has already made preparations to capture Yunseol as soon as she enters the building, and wonders if there are any people who would help her in this state. As she is wondering about that, she is greeted by Lee Jae-hai, who is the vice president of the Dawn Guild. Jae-hai asks Yunseol's reason for coming here, since originally should be on a raid along with Seo Junghyun, and asks if something has happened during the raid. Yunseol is confused after seeing Jae-hai, who is one of the 4 strongest hunters in South Korea, and wonders if she can trust Jae-hai, because even though Jae-hai is known to be staunch and fair, she is quite hard to read. Yunseol realizes that she has no other choice, except telling Jae-hai about everything that has happened so far, so Yunseol prepares herself to explain everything to Jae-hai. The scene then shifts to Shinhian, who concludes that the man in front of him must be Kang-jin, considering how he is asking about Yunseol, and is infuriated after seeing him barge into his house with his men. Shinhian asks Kang-jin if his parents taught him to break the door down when he is entering someone else's house, to which Kang-jin responds that they would have knocked on the door respectfully if they were here for a housewarming party, which is not the case this time. One of Kang-jin's men wants to punish Shinhian for disrespecting Kang-jin, but Kang-jin stops him and asks Shinhian about Yunseol's whereabouts, telling Shinhian that they do care about him. Our boy realizes that Kang-jin is looking for Yunseol to punish her for killing his son, so he tells Kang-jin that if he is looking for the person who killed his son, then that person is standing right in front of him. Kang-jin becomes enraged upon discovering his son's murderer and unleashes his power to kill Shinhian, which is something our boy was eagerly anticipating because he wanted to see Kang-jin's potential, while Jae-hai, on the other hand, tells Yunseol that she wants to meet her brother. Kang-jin attacks our boy with his long sword, but our boy effortlessly dodges by jumping into the air and realizes that Kang-jin's sword is imbued with some kind of mysterious power, which Shinhian believes is because of the different origin of sword energy and sword aura, despite there being a similarity between the two. Shinhian wonders if this is the ability of the people Yuniel referred to as hunters, and suddenly remembers that the guy named Junghian also used a strange power. Shinhian is glad that he was able to find a research specimen, while Kongjin, on the other hand, uses his warrior skill, consecutive strike, on Shinhian, which Shinhian first dodges and then blocks the last strike using his body. Our boy is quite impressed at Kongjin's current level, which he believes to be around the level of Supreme Peak Martial Master level, and realizes that there are just 10,000 people like Kongjin in Korea. Kongjin, on the other hand, is in utter shock after seeing Shinhian block his consecutive strike with just his body and is now pushing Hyun Kongjin back with just one arm. Shinhian's fight gets disturbed by two subordinates of Kongjin, a knight and a warrior, which allows Kongjin to escape from Shinhian's range, while the another one of Kongjin's subordinates, which is a mage, attacks our boy with his fireball by using his wizard skill. The warrior notices that our boy is in pinch, so he jumps at him to finish our boy with his sword, but this only impresses Shinhian, whose expectations about Korean hunters have increased because of their attacks. Shinhian easily blocks the sword, crushing it into pieces with his bare hands, and unleashes his power to put off the fire, which shocks the warrior. Our boy is surprised to learn that all three of Kongjin's subordinates are at peak martial master levels, which require not only 1,000 years of experience and techniques, but also being born with exceptional talent. But the current humanity has achieved all of that in just a short span of 14 years. Moreover, there are a handful of supreme peak martial masters like Kongjin in this current world. Shinhian is quite amazed at the achievements of humanity. Yet, he considers that they are still not at the rank of the top 10 martial masters, whom Shinhian destroyed all at once because Jianghu's rating did not include him, so he chose to set up the ranking afresh after reaching the top. The scene then shifts to Yuniel, who is in her car with Vice Guild leader Jaihai, driving to her home, because Jaihai suddenly wants to meet Yuniel's brother. Yuniel believes she will get mad after not being able to keep up with strange things that are happening with her lately, not to mention how she allowed Jaihai to meet with her brother, even though Yuniel is not sure whether Jaihai is her ally or not. However, Yuniel was not able to reject Jaihai's offer when she promised to help Yuniel as much as she can for Yuniel's recent incident with Junghian, and not only with that, but also the problems Yuniel would face from director Seo Kongjin. Yuniel cannot help but think what are Jaihai's goal, even though Jaihai assured her that she would not do anything strange, as she has no intention of making Shinhian her enemy. As Yuniel is driving, Jaihai suddenly asks Yuniel how many years it has been since her brother disappeared, to which Yuniel responds that Shinhian vanished 14 years ago, which amazes Jaihai, because she knows the truth regarding our boy's disappearance and concludes that Shinhian must have lived in Murim for 140 years, which means he must have gotten insanely strong in those years. Jaihai then asks Yuniel about her brother's personality, to which she responds that Shinhian is a warm and kind soul, while also being very good at studying, as he was able to secure admission to a very prestigious university without taking any kind of tuition, which just proves how much of a genius he is. Yuniel further adds that above all of these qualities, her brother Shinhian is very tenacious and persistent, and once he starts something, he makes sure to see it to the end. The scene then shifts to Shinhian, who asks the magician to use his power, because he has never seen or heard about such power in Murim, and Shinhian feels a strange energy from it. However, as Shinhian is talking, the warrior tries to attack him from behind, but our boy smashes his face, as he has no interest in that subordinate. The magician tries to form ice shards, which makes our boy remember that he has experienced tons of tricks like that in the Northern Sea Ice Palace, and uses his powers to form a 5-headed dragon in an instant, while freezing the magician in an instant. The knight, who goes by the name Kim Si-hyuk, runs for his life after observing the situation. However, he is not able to get out of the house because of a very strong barrier and gets killed by our boy in the process. Shinhian does not like the way Kim Si-hyuk ran away from battle, because he is the shield that is supposed to be blocking the enemy at forefront instead of exposing his back and running away. But Shinhian believes such a behavior is expected from a bunch of gangster who have no sense of loyalty. Kongjin, who is thinking of a way to get out of a situation, wonders if Shinhian is under the wizard system, because that would explain the use of ice magic and barrier. But if Shinhian was a wizard, then he should not be able to block Kang Jin's attack. As Kang Jin is wondering about that, he notices that despite the intensity of their fight, there is not any form of damage done to this house, and wonders if there is more to this barrier. Kang Jin asks Shinhian if he used his tricks in this house, because he knew people would come to attack him. Shinhian responds that he used the mind's sword to cover this area because it had been so long since he returned to this house, and he didn't want some gangsters to dirty his floor. Our boy realizes that it would be hard for Kang Jin to understand the level of technique he is using here, so he tries to simplify it for Kang Jin, telling him that they were in Shinhian's territory the moment they entered the house. Kang Jin calls Shinhian a monster, and after realizing that there is no escaping from this place, he decides to take down Shinhian along with him with the help of his berserker skill. Shinhian responds that the real monster in this house is Kang Jin himself and asks him if he intends to die together with Shinhian, considering how he has increased his power exponentially. After seeing how Kang Jin is not able to listen to a single word Shinhian said to him, Shinhian concludes that Kang Jin has lost his rationality and is now attacking him like a beast. Shinhian comments that Kang Jin's hot temper is just like a martial artist, so because of that, our boy decides to show some respect to Kang Jin. Shinhian slices Kang Jin's head off his neck with a broken sword he grabbed from the floor, telling Kang Jin that he should be honored, for that was the strike of the Supreme Emperor. After severing the head of Seo Kang Jin, Shinhian quickly starts cleaning his house before Yuniel sees the blood in the house. However, our boy is a bit late, as Yuniel enters the house with Jai-hai while our boy is still busy cleaning the house. Yuniel finds it strange to find her door open, only to realize there are corpses in her house. Our boy tells Yuniel to not be surprised as it was just a housewarming party. However, Yuniel does not like the joke and asks Shinhian if he is going to keep causing trouble after coming trouble. Seeing Yuniel's expression, Shinhian comments that she would easily be able to become the strongest martial artist in Murim. While they are chatting, Shinhian notices Jai-hai standing behind Yuniel, whose internal art he finds to be perfectly resonating with the heavenly martial origin cultivation art. But our boy gets surprised when Jai-hai communicates with Shinhian via sound transmission. Shinhian gets further surprised when Jai-hai tells him that he is mistaken if he believes he is the only person who has been to that place. Yuniel wakes up, shocked, and rushes to the living room to confirm that what she saw yesterday was not a dream, but rather a beautiful reality. Yuniel is relieved to find her brother standing in the living room, assuring her that he will not disappear again. Yuniel asks Shinhian the reason he is up so early, but Shinhian receives a message at that point and tells Yuniel that he will talk to him as he has to go somewhere. It has already been a week since Shinhian returned, but it still does not feel real to Yuniel. Yuniel recalls that Li Jai-hai, who wanted to speak with Shinhian, only told him they would meet again and left, after which some people dressed in black appeared in the house and handled the corpses of board director Seo Kang Jin and his subordinates. The next day, a report on Seo Junghian, as well as the disappearance of Seo Kang Jin shortly after his abrupt retirement, appeared on the news, convincing Yuniel that Li Jai-hai had kept her promise. Yuniel, on the other hand, was placed on long-term probation from the guild for being the sole survivor and taking responsibility for the Red Dungeon raid. But none of this bothers Yuniel more than the fact that her brother was called in by Li Jai-hai earlier today. The scene then shifts to Shinhian, who meets Li Jai-hai in a restaurant, telling her that the reason she does not seem to have any care in the world is because there is always someone on surveillance 24/7, to which Jai-hai responds that it is not surveillance. Rather, it is a guard. Shinhian takes a sip from a tea offered to him by Li Jai-hai and notices that it has a familiar taste. Li Jai-hai realizes that our boy is familiar with Junshan Injin, a tea that Jai-hai frequently drank in Honam while she was in the Murim world. Shinhian likes that Jai-hai is getting straight to the point, while Jai-hai informs our boy that so far, 3 people have been confirmed to have returned from the Murim world, one of which is Jai-hai, while the other 2 are Shinhian and the guild leader of Twilight, Park Taeun. Jai-hai then informs Shinhian about Twilight, a guild that, along with Dawn, split the influence of the Korean Hunters Association. Despite the fact that there is currently anarchy between Twilight and Dawn, Jai-hai was able to compare stories with Park Tae-hoon long ago, which revealed a few things. Park Tae-hoon opened his eyes in a strange cave one day, and on his side there was a book on the heavenly martial origin cultivation, and after leaving the cave, he had found himself in a place known as Murim. Jai-hai mentions that this is the same thing that Shinhian, Park Tae-hoon, and Jai-hai herself have all experienced, with Shinhian being the only one to return to his original world many years later after the world had already entered an era of hunters and dungeons. Jai-hai mentions that no one knows if it is some kind of duty or an evil plot from a higher power, but Jai-hai believes that the way this world flipped on its head and how three of them went to Murim world are definitely related. Jai-hai wants to know how much our boy knows about hunters and dungeons, so she asks him to start telling what he knows, on which our boy mentions that there was a divine revelation from a goddess 14 years ago, which was the cause of the appearance of dungeons, monsters, and hunters. Moreover, the system of classes and skills is not much different from the role-playing games everyone used to play as kids. After finishing Hyung the explanation, Shinhian tells Jai-hai that he wants to know how she and Park Tae-hoon returned to Earth, which surprises Jai-hai, but she informs Shinhian that they returned to Earth after dying and asks Shinhian if it was not the same for him. Our boy suddenly gets angry, which startles Jai-hai a bit. However, our boy tries his best to not break the cup in his hand. Shinhian is flabbergasted after learning what witnessing the end of the world truly meant and wonders if Jai-hai knows the person who sent him to Murim and the purpose behind that. Shinhian believes that just like the reward for maxing out the martial arts was returning to Earth, there must be an appropriate reward for maxing out one's level as a hunter, and that reward would bring our boy closer to the goddess, only if she does not want to lose face as a goddess. Shinhian then asks Jai-hai about the reason she approached him, because Shinhian knows Jai-hai wants something from Shinhian. However, Jai-hai responds that she will talk about it while they walk outside. They go for a stroll in the park, while Jai-hai tells Jai-hai that before he returned, the Dawn Guild was confronting the Twilight Guild cautiously in a situation in which they had no idea what could go wrong, and it went on until board director Seo Kong-jin passed away. Jai-hai mentions that since Shinhian got rid of the central force behind the Dawn Guild, he has to take responsibility, so Jai-hai requests Shinhian join the Dawn Guild, as she will not only offer Shinhian the seat of an executive, but also an unimaginable wealth and fame. Shinhian responds that it would be hard to reject Jai-hai's offer because she is his sister's superior. However, Shinhian still decides to refuse Jai-hai's offer because he prefers to act alone. Moreover, there is no way Shinhian would bother serving someone who is weaker than him. Jai-hai stays silent for a time, and then says that they should have a duel to see who is genuinely the weaker one. However, Shinhian mentions that his being stronger is evident, since 1 year in Murim is equivalent to 10 years in this world, and Shinhian survived for 140 years in the Murim world. However, Jai-hai does not believe age and skill to be always proportional, to which Shinhian agrees, telling Jai-hai that if others were to spend 300 years in the Murim world, they would still be weaker than him. Jai-hai gets irritated by Shinhian's constant bragging and unleashes her origin skill, Shadow Dance, on our boy, which cuts his senses off, while also causing his surroundings to grow murkier. Shinhian assumes the affected radius and believes that recreating this large-scale art with only the physical laws of this world would take a lot of time and energy. Jai-hai then informs our boy that her origin skill allows her to create a pocket dimension that mirrors their real world, and from the outside, it would appear as if both of them have suddenly disappeared. Jai-hai then tries to intimidate Shinhian by telling him that she was famously known as Bloody Plum Blossom in Murim and has never failed an assassination. Shinhian satirically responds that he already knew Jai-hai fights to death, while being severely limited. However, Jai-hai does not seem impressed by the satire as she ignores it and informs Shinhian that he can either escape this place by dying or breaking Jai-hai. Shinhian seems impressed by the assassination notices in broad daylight and asks Jai-hai if her skill has other purposes than trapping her opponent. However, Shinhian is barely able to finish his sentence when he notices that Jai-hai's knife is right at his neck. Jai-hai responds that Shinhian is right about her skill and tries to slice Shinhian's neck, but Shinhian easily dodges it by moving his neck backwards. However, Jai-hai does not stop here and continues with her attacks one after another, making sure Shinhian does not even get a breather. Shinhian, despite being charged at by Jai-Hai with a knife, manages to block and dodge all of her slashes. So instead of continuing with short-ranged attacks, Jai-Hai tries a long-range attack, but our boy dodges it by jumping backwards. Shinhian praises Jai-Hai's techniques with daggers and is impressed by her peculiar style, mentioning that it resembles the Moonlight Blood Road, which was martial art of the greatest assassin of Murim, who was famously known as the Dark King. Jai-Hai is amazed that Shinhian was able to figure out the technique with one look, on which Shinhian explains that he has already fought with someone who used this technique, and because Shinhian was a bit inexperienced at that time in the Murim world, he ended up killing him in an instant. Jai-Hai gets shocked upon hearing that, while our boy, noticing that Jai-Hai was taken aback by his statement, allows her to use 3 styles that are used in this technique, since Jai-Hai is also Shinhian's junior in the Murim world. Shinhian promises to join the Dawn Guild if Jai-Hai manages to beat him with the help of 3 styles, and considering what Jai-Hai did just a moment the first style, she now has 2 styles remaining. Jai-Hai accepts Shinhian's condition and completely escapes Shinhian's senses, as if she has disappeared from the domain or has been vaporized, which is something our boy finds surprising even though he is in her domain and wonders if this is also the power of Jai-Hai's skill. Jai-Hai's attack surrounds our boy from all directions, but our boy manages to dodge it. However, despite that, our boy is not free from the attack, as the attack follows him wherever he goes. So our boy cancels the attack using his own energy. Seeing Shinhian totally focused on Jai-Hai's attack, Jai-Hai decides to use this chance to attack Shinhian and charges at him with her knife. However, Shinhian was able to easily deflect her attack, rendering it completely useless, reminding Jai-Hai that she has already used 2 out of 3 styles. Jai-Hai mentions that she already expected our boy to be the strongest martial artist, because Shinhian was considered as strong as the Shaolin Master, who was the strongest master who died at the age of 150 years. However, despite being considered the equal of the strongest martial artist, Shinhian treats it as if it is something mediocre, which Jai-Hai finds strange and asks Shinhian if she will be considered the strongest martial artist after defeating him. Our boy stands speechless at Jai-Hai's determination to defeat him, and Jai-Hai also decides to go all out on her last attack by using her assassin skill, Shadow Dagger, which swiftly attacks our boy from all sides, making it hard for him to dodge it. Seeing that it would not be possible for him to dodge the attack, Shinhian finally uses his Mind Sword to nullify Jai-Hai's 3rd style, which also sends a huge slab of rock towards Jai-Hai, who is not able to dodge it, as she feels that her boy is being restrained by something. However, Jai-Hai gets saved by the very person she was trying to fight, who crushes the slab of rock with just 1 punch. Shinhian asks Jai-Hai if she wants to continue the fight, even though her 3rd style was also not able to even put a scratch on him. Jai-Hai, who is trembling because of a near-death experience, responds that she has no intentions of continuing and accepts her loss. Jai-Hai promises not to ask Shinhian for any more matches, but in exchange, she asks Shinhian to explain his last attack, because when Shinhian unleashed it, Jai-Hai felt as if she was up against an existence she could not expose. Our boy does not answer Jai-Hai's question, but instead praises Jai-Hai, for her skill was amazing, to the point that Jai-Hai would be more than strong enough to kill an ordinary strong martial individual. Jai-Hai is hurt by the word ordinary and asks Shinhian about the realm he has reached, but our boy again does not answer her question and tells Jai-Hai that the effects of combing martial arts and skills were amazing. Our boy found the match to be quite satisfying, so he decides to accept Jai-Hai's offer on the condition that the Dawn Guild will give Shinhian material support and information, while Shinhian will support the Dawn Guild with his power. However, it will only be considered as an alliance because Shinhian does not want to be under someone as he does not want to be helped. Jai-Hai agrees to accept Shinhian's proposal only if Shinhian promises to never join hands with the Twilight Guild no matter what happens. Shinhian promises Jai-Hai to never join hands with the Twilight Guild, and to strengthen the vow, he puts his name of the Supreme Sword Emperor on the line, which Jai-Hai finds quite flashy. Shinhian tells Jai-Hai to remove the surveillance on him, as he only put up with it since it was by his little sister's workplace. However, Shinhian has no intention of tolerating it any further, on which Jai-Hai assures to not do anything that will harm their relationship. Shinhian thanks Jai-Hai for understanding and tears a piece of cloth from his arm to hand it to Jai-hai. Our boy apologizes to Jai-hai for taunting her and saying bad stuff about 3 styles, telling Jai-hai that he only wanted to confirm the true skills of a master of the Supreme Peak Realm and a high-ranking hunter. Jai-hai appreciates Shinhian's kind words and tells our boy that it was because of his taunting words she was able to fight him with the intention to kill, which also explains why Jai-hai was only aiming for Shinhian's vital points. As they are about to go back, Shinhian asks Jai-hai the reason for her learning assassination out of all the martial arts, to which Jai-hai responds that it was because of the thought of desperately wanting to kill someone. Shinhian knows what Jai-hai is talking about, because he also thinks about the very thing all the time. The scene then shifts to the driver of Jai-hai, who asks Jai-hai about her current condition, because it looked like Jai-hai even used his strongest technique, shadow dance, on Shinhian. Jai-hai responds that Shinhian surpassed her expectations for her shadow dance, which was not strong enough to even put a scratch on Shinhian, and now, because of that, Jai-hai's stamina is severely low and she is also out of MP. However, now that Jai-hai thinks about her fight, she realizes that Shinhian did not attack her once, which also makes Jai-hai wonder about the skills Shinhian used to obstruct her blades. Shinhian returns home after the fight, and as he enters the room, Yuniel grabs Shinhian out of nowhere and tries to crush him, which startles our boy a bit. Yuniel is not happy with her brother going out often, because she fears that Shinhian is going to disappear again, so Yuniel requests our boy to stop doing dangerous things and tells him to stay at home. Despite knowing how his sister is feeling, Shinhian decides to surprise Yuniel and tells her that he is thinking of becoming a hunter. However, Yuniel gets irritated by this and asks Shinhian if he wants to die by her hands. The scene then shifts to Shinhian, who takes out a mystic cube that he got from Lee Jai-hai, who told him that this will help him get a hunter status window while Yuniel, on the other hand, is tired of how stubborn her brother is. Despite Yuniel repeatedly requesting that he not become a hunter, Shinhian grabs the mystic cube and uses it, after which the mystic cube dissolves in his hands, which makes Shinhian curious whether Lee Jai-hai loves to scam people. However, Yuniel explains that it is supposed to happen this way and tells Shinhian to try calling out status window. After calling out the status window loud, 2 status windows appear in front of our boy, one of which is the Murim status window, which cannot be seen by anyone other than Shinhian, while on the other side is Shinhian's hunter status window, which mentions that Shinhian is a classless hunter. Yuniel is glad that Shinhian is a classless hunter, which means that Shinhian is not supposed to be a hunter, but Shinhian does not understand why that is the case. Yuniel explains that the hunters are divided into 6 basic classes that are warriors, shielders, wizards, archers, clerics, and assassins, and there are more if one includes the high-rank classes. As an example, Yuniel mentions that her basic class is archer, but her high-rank class is sniper, which cannot be rejected or changed later. However, Shinhian is classless, which means Shinhian did not receive any class at all, and he is just a generic person. Yuniel further adds that even though classless people are also allowed to become a hunter, things get problematic when it comes to skills. To gain skills, a hunter needs to gain experience points, which also increases their levels and enables the hunters to fight monsters with the skills they receive from these experience points. However, unlike the 6 classes of hunters, a classless hunter has to get skills from a skill cube, which costs a lot. To give Shinhian an idea, Yuniel informs him that the cheapest skill is hand-to-hand technique, which can be obtained if one has 20 million won, while sword technique, on the other hand, costs 25 million won. Yuniel tries to dishearten Shinhian with some harsh facts, mentioning that, unlike hunters with classes who can automatically attain skills by leveling up, classless hunters must constantly invest funds into their skills. However, given that Shinhian only returned to his world a week ago, there is no way he would have that much money. So Yuniel tries to put the final nail in the coffin by asking our boy if he has these large sums of money, to which our boy responds that he has Lee Jai-hai as a financial backer who can give him up to 10 billion won in cash. Yuniel is disappointed that all of her efforts to explain the consequences of being a classless hunter to Shinhian were futile because he was not deceived by Yuniel's disheartening words, whereas Shinhian is glad that he made the alliance with Lee Jai-hai because without it, he would have been in big trouble. However, Shinhian does not like the fact that someone like him, who will never appear in Niram again, is just a classless hunter. The scene then shifts to Dawn Guild's tutorial dungeon in Chayak Mountain, which is also famously known as Rabbit Dungeon, where Yunseal is explaining to Shinhian how one must do their utmost to catch even one rabbit. Yunseal mentions that everyone who took these rabbits lightly was brutally defeated by them. However, Shinhian does not think such a thing will happen to him, and asks Yunseal to explain how they would be able to earn money using a moonstone. Yunseal responds that moonstone is a natural resource of dungeons that does not pollute and holds an incredible amount of energy, which is why people started using them instead of nuclear power plants, which slowly disappeared due to the occurrence of the monsters. Following the explanation, Yunseal continues to warn our boy to be cautious, as it does not matter how strong a martial artist one is, because anything can happen inside a dungeon. However, our boy managed to kill 4 monster rabbits in an instant before Yunseal could finish her sentence, which makes Yunseal wonder if her brother is even listening to her. Shinhian, on the other hand, realizes that he does not gain any hunter experience when he uses his martial arts to defeat monsters. Shinhian then opens his status window to look at his warrior class skill, Dagger Technique, which he got from Li Jihai, which is a passive skill of D, rarity, which means it can be learnt by anybody. This skill allows our boy to use a dagger, while also allowing him to use forward attacking skills. However, Shinhian would only be able to use this skill with a weapon that is recognized as a dagger. Shinhian asks Yunseal if he should have asked Li Jihai for another skill in addition to this technique, but Yunseal rejects the idea, telling Shinhian that he is shameless for asking for another free skill on top of a tutorial dungeon. However, Shinhian does not like the D rarity of his skill. Yunseal, on the other hand, warns her brother of Li Jihai, telling Shinhian Li Jihai is not an average person and would definitely try to take everything from Shinhian. Shinhian's expressions suddenly change after this, which makes Yunseal wonder if she said something wrong. However, Shinhian controls his expression and grabs Yunseal's hands, telling her that there is a better place that they should see. Shinhian takes Yunseal to a cliff, below which there is a huge colony of rabbits, which shocks the life out of Yunseal. Shinhian informs Yunseal that there are exactly 337 rabbits down there, which he checked out with his sense from afar before coming here, on which Yunseal comments that they are too much for a beginner and proceeds to go for her arrows. However, Shinhian tells his sister to not get worried over something like this and jumps off the cliff right in the middle of the colony of monster rabbits. Shinhian is infuriated at getting a D dagger technique, even though he has already reached peak martial swordsmanship. But what angers our boy more is the fact that he is an unimportant classless person, which is something Shinhian considers a joke that he cannot tolerate. Yunseal, on the other hand, is also furious to see his brother jump right into the colony of the monster rabbits without her. However, Shinhian tells Yunseal to put her joke aside for a moment, as he is thinking of how he should cook these monster rabbits. As Shinhian is about to attack, he receives many system messages which are teaching him how to use the dagger, but this only worsens Shinhian's already bad mood, because someone like Shinhian has no need for a teacher. Our boy takes his anger out on the monster rabbits and cuts them off in an instant, telling the system that he is 100 years early to teach him. However, even after cutting all the monster rabbits, Shinhian still receives tens of annoying system messages about the dagger technique. Shinhian wonders if the system is again teaching him something about the daggers. However, as our boy reads the messages, he realizes that system is telling him that his proficiency of swordsmanship has increased. Shinhian does not like the small status window, so he looks for the settings where he can change it. But as he is doing that, our boy is approached by his sister, who is curious as to what her brother did this time. Shinhian responds that he does not speak much English, but based on what he understands, his mastery of all swordsmanship has been reflected in the system, or there is a system error. Yunseal reads the notification and is shocked to learn that Shinhian has achieved grade A+ proficiency in an instant. Shinhian glosses over system messages and asks Yunseal if it is possible to gain experience points when fighting monsters by using a passive skill that does not consume MP, to which Yunseal nods, curious as to what her brother intends to do with the information. However, Yunseal has no idea that her brother was able to get Origin Skill, which is a passive skill that does not consume MP. Origin Skill is a skill with A+ rarity, making it a supreme treasure with a questionable existence. And Shinhian already has A+ proficiency in it, which allows him to freely transform beyond perfection. Shinhian then uses his martial arts skill on a bunch of monster rabbits, and notices that he can finally gain hunter experience points by using martial arts. Shinhian believes that despite Park Tae-hoon and Lee Jae-hai being the strongest hunters, Yunseal should also have gotten an origin skill like them, which makes Yunseal realize that the key to gaining that is the martial arts. So she tells Shinhian that she wants to learn martial arts. Yunseal suspects Shinhian to be strong when he easily defeated Seo Kong-jin, but after seeing Shinhian's power personally, Yunseal has truly realized how powerful her brother is. Yunseal knows that the things that happened at the Red Wolf dungeon would not happen again unless there is a drastic change. However, there is no guarantee that this world would be free of such disaster, and Yunseal, who is the team leader, would not be able to make any difference in the battlefield if she is still on the same level as back then, which will leave her with more regrets than before, something that she does not want to happen again. Yunseal knows that she would not be able to become as strong as her brother, but Yunseal believes she would be able to make a significant difference if she learned the martial arts from Shinhian. So Yunseal begs her brother to teach him. Our boy tells Yunseal to calm down, assuring Yunseal that he will teach her martial arts. However, it will be a bit tough because he has never taken on a disciple. Shinhian is glad that things turned out this way, because despite being the strongest, Shinhian cannot always watch on Yunseal, so she should at least be capable of protecting themselves, because there is no knowing what the future may bring. Shinhian then tells Yunseal that they should move to next point, but Yunseal does not like how they are treating this tutorial dungeon as a golf course. However, still decides to follow Shinhian. As they are running, Yunseal asks Shinhian if he would keep on using warrior-related skills considering how he has now mastered swordsmanship, to which Shinhian, who is dealing with the two monster rabbits coming towards him, responds that in his current situation, his future path as a hunter is unclear, as he is able to level up using martial arts now. And even though our boy can raise his hunter level using martial arts, he wants to master a special class skill. Shinhian remembers that Lee Jae-hai, who was a stinger, was able to level up by linking her martial arts and assassin skills. So to do the same things, Shinhian also needs to find a skill that he can link with his martial arts. Our boy suddenly remembers something and jumps into the air, concluding that any skill that has an embodiment of a martial art will be useless to learn, and although there were skills that were difficult to link with his martial arts, the magic was the only skill that he was not able to link with his martial arts. Our boy, while being high in the air, hits the monster rabbits using the fireball which was used by Kongjin's magician, which obliterates all of them at once, and tells Yunseal that he is going to become a wizard. Yunseal gets stunned after hearing this, wondering how many times she has to remind Shinhian that he is classless, which means it would be impossible for him to become a wizard. Moreover, if it was that easy to become a wizard, then other classes would not have existed. Yunseal, who is tired to see her brother act like that, decides to leave our boy alone in his stupidity, while our boy, on the other hand, realizes that there is a big gap between his Murim and Hunter system status windows. Our boy notices that the Murim system windows only look at one's own state. Moreover, there is no special function other than checking the level and the state of external and internal martial arts, which is not a bad thing, because knowing where one's state is a big help to those who use martial arts. The Hunter system's status window, on the other hand, displays everything from skills to stamina and even MP. Moreover, the layout is user-friendly and has a lot of detailed functions. Because of that, our boy believes that the personality and approach of both systems are very different, as if these two systems were created by two completely different personalities with similar abilities. The Hunter system encourages hunters to fight monsters in order to earn experience points, and because rewards are given quickly and consistently, it promotes hunter growth. Although nothing can be said about the Hunter system's risk factor, anyone with determination can become strong in this system. However, the way of getting stronger in Murim was much slower and dangerous than the Hunter system, and it was a way to attain enlightenment through endless investments of time in training and risking one's life. But if one is not able to do that, then a fateful encounter can help with that, which is something that was experienced by Shinhian, Lee Jae-hai, and Park Tae-hoon. It was a martial arts created by a heavenly god, a legendary figure that became a god through divine ascension in the distant past, and after that, he created his own heavenly martial origin cultivation art. Getting his hands on the secret treasure of a legend that has been in battle in Murim for a long time seemed too obvious for our boy, which is why Shinhian overlooked it. But considering how humanity received the hunter system from a goddess, Shinhian wonders if the being who sent him to the Murim world is heavenly god. The scene then shifts to Shinhian, who now stands in front of a huge chicken, realizing that the reason he came back to Korea is because of this chicken, which is the traditional food of Korea. Our boy has reached Hunter level 22 after spending a month leveling up in dungeons with the help of Lee Jae-hai. And he is also teaching Yuniel about the 365 blood vessels of the body, as well as how to channel her internal arts. But even though Yuniel is too old to learn martial arts, Shinhian can still bring out her internal power by forcing the chi channels to remove impure chi. With a warning to not vomit despite her blood spurts and barely saving his hair, Shinhian was able to bring out Yuniel's internal power, which allowed her to grow one level. The scene then shifts Shinhian, who is with Lee Jae-hai in a restaurant, as she asks Shinhian whether they should start the settlement. Shinhian notices that, just like before, Jae-hai jumped right into business. But the reason for this is that Jae-hai does not like getting the short end of the stick. Shinhian asks Jae-hai if she has something planned considering how it has been a long time since their meetup, to which Jae-hai responds that it is something like that and asks Shinhian if he would like to go on a date with her. Lee Jae-hai asks Shinhian to go on a date, and Shinhian freezes for a moment. Crossing his arms, he admits that it is his first time ever receiving a date request in his whole life, but he isn't feeling serious about it. Lee Jae-hai laughs lightly and invites him again. She explains that a new dungeon has appeared in Bucheon with a danger level of 10, while the estimated entry level is between 45 and 50. This means it requires a team of high-ranking hunters to clear it. She adds that this kind of dungeon isn't a place someone can enter alone, especially not with a hunter in their 20s. With a cheerful tone, she says that things will be different with Cha Shinhian SSI. Shinhian wonders aloud if she plans to enter the dungeon with just the two of them and asks her reasoning. Lee Jae-hai explains that her goal is to control the number of high-danger dungeons and also help Shinhian grow as quickly as possible as a hunter. Shinhian smirks, wondering aloud if she plans to carry him along the way. Lee Jae-hai is stunned by his words, surprised at where he learned to speak like that, and jokes that he sounds like an old Murim master. Shinhian argues that he at least knows that much and tells her not to treat him like an old man. While playing with the bowl in front of him, Shinhian begins to understand why she has been supporting him so much, just to form an alliance, and he asks what her intentions truly are in trying to help him become a powerful hunter. Lee Jae-hai stays silent for a moment while he continues playing with the bowl. Then she asks if he has ever heard about the Sun Festival, and starts explaining it herself. She says that it is a festival held every year by the Dawn Guild, essentially a friendly battle festival, to determine the best guild in Korea. On the surface, it appears to promote harmony between the guilds, but in reality, it's an event to gauge the strength of their opponents and decide when they can eliminate them. Lee Jae-hai describes it as a scaled-down version of war. She explains that the Twilight Guild and the Dawn Guild are constantly at odds over dungeon ownership, leading to unnecessary conflict, something the public isn't aware of, as these clashes usually happen inside dungeons. But now, they are in a time when the risk of a full-fledged war breaking out is higher than ever. Lee Jae-hai describes them as a ticking bomb that could explode at any moment. Shinhian straightforwardly asks why the Twilight Guild and the Dawn Guild are fighting each other in the first place, calling it a bit brutal to consider it a simple battle for ownership. While pouring tea, Lee Jae-hai mentions that it's all happening because of Park Tae-hoon. She says it wasn't like this in the past, but suddenly, he started becoming obsessed with gaining more power and began speaking about following the Sky War God, or something similar. Shinhian widens his eyes and interrupts her, shouting the name of the Sky War God. He stands up in shock, demanding to know what kind of connection exists between the Sky War God and Park Tae-hoon. Lee Jae-hai raises both hands and tells him to calm down, saying that she doesn't know much about the Sky War God either. She explains that she only heard that Park Tae-hoon received a message through his Murim status window. Sitting back down, Shinhian looks downward, lost in thought about that message. Lee Jae-hai continues, saying that she cannot even tell if it was true, since it's impossible to see another person's Murim status window. She adds that even though Park Tae-hoon supposedly received some kind of message from the Sky War God, she still can't understand why he now treats the Dawn Guild and her with hostility, especially when they once had such a close relationship. She recalls her time in the Murim world, remembering how they were once comrades who understood each other better than anyone else. Shinhian remains silent, listening carefully. Then Lee Jae-hai looks at him with determined eyes and formally addresses him as Cha Shinhian SSI, requesting that he join the Sun Festival as an ally of the Dawn Guild. Later, their driver waits inside the car, while both of them continue their discussion as they walk toward it. Lee Jae-hai explains that the balance of power, which once seemed impossible to change, has now shifted in favor of the Twilight Guild. The reason is that the Twilight Guild is taking over both the dungeons and the surrounding routes. After getting into the car, Lee Jae-hai adds that once this imbalance of power becomes evident during the Sun Festival, it will mean the end for the Dawn Guild. She sighs deeply, mentioning the loss of director Seo Kang-jin, who was their strongest fighter. Losing him at such an important time has left a major gap in their strength, while Shinhian quietly sits there, feeling conflicted by her words. He frowns while admitting that he has understood the situation to some degree, but he is still unaware of her reasons for wanting to make him a powerful hunter. Closing her eyes, Lee Jae-hai explains that the Sun Festival is an event where numerous external media groups are invited to broadcast the festival live. Pointing toward Shinhian, she wonders aloud if he plans to reveal his martial arts in front of the entire world. She adds that it will be difficult for him to explain to the public about his origins from the Murim, which could potentially attract unwanted attention from hunters around the globe. She continues, saying he must have a great deal of confidence if he thinks he can handle the International Hunters Association. Looking away, Shinhian mutters that he cannot deny it, while thinking that he has been getting teased a lot today. Lee Jae-hai steps slightly back and says that this is exactly why he needs to attend the Sun Festival using only the abilities of a hunter, asking if he understands her point. Shinhian reluctantly nods, thinking that since he owes her, he cannot argue any further. Lee Jae-hai smiles, saying she already expected him to agree, and her driver begins pulling out a briefcase. Shinhian questions if that was taken as a sign of his acceptance. She opens the briefcase and tells him that it contains the 6 wizard skills he requested, along with 1 high-class mage skill and 1 sorcerer skill. Shinhian is surprised to see them. He begins thinking that he once planned to go against Park Tae-hoon and wonders if this could be considered a small victory. Suddenly, a piece of paper flies toward him, and before he knows it, he is surrounded by piles of documents. Feeling irritated, he asks what all the papers are about. Lee Jae-hai explains that unlike in the Murim, there are now legal procedures to follow. She mentions that these are all official documents proving his formal alliance with the Dawn Guild. Lee Jae-hai further elaborates that these papers include confirmation of everything they have supplied so far, as well as a contract for timely payment. She also tells him about his official hunter registration papers and the guild creation documents while putting her pen back into her pouch, but Shinhian only feels more annoyed. He looks down at one of the documents and asks why he needs to create a guild in the first place. Lee Jae-hai explains that there are strict regulations preventing freelance hunters from entering the Sun Festival. She also mentions the issues they have been facing regarding the receipts for all the items and skills provided to him. Showing him the briefcase again, she asks him to guess how much those skills cost in total, then answers her own question, saying that they probably cost more than the price of a house. She tells him to sign if he understands the situation. This makes Shinhian mutter that it was her plan from the very beginning. While filling out the registration form, Shinhian sighs and wonders aloud how he got dragged into all this. When he reaches the guild name column, Lee Jae-hai tells him it's just a formality and he can write whatever comes to mind. Shinhian names his guild Limitless. Later, Shinhian enters a dungeon along with Lee Jae-hai. He comments that lately, his life has been nothing but traveling between his home and dungeons. Lee Jae-hai smiles and says that he looks like a model student. Both of them are inside the Buchin Monster Bird dungeon, where dragon-like creatures soar above them. Lee Jae-hai warns Shinhian to be careful, explaining that while the dragon monsters are not individually strong, they have received reports that an infinite number of them exist in this dungeon. The monster birds begin to swarm toward them. Activating his power, Shinhian says that his key senses are detecting more than 3,000 of them, surprising Li Jihai. Looking ahead, Shinhian forms a beam of lightning energy and says that for him, the more enemies, the better. Sliding 1 foot back, he releases the lightning beam toward the flying monsters. The beam rapidly expands, taking down a large number of monster birds. Li Jihai, astonished, exclaims that he only learned that skill a few hours ago. Shinhian calmly explains that mana and ki function in similar ways, but Li Jihai replies that it wasn't the same case for her. She warns him that if he continues to overuse his power like that from the start, he will soon run out of MP. Shinhian confidently argues that it will never happen, declaring that he is the limitless wizard, Cha Shinhian. Li Jihai chuckles and tells him that he is still technically classless. As Shinhian moves red stones with his energy, he asks if there is usually only one type of monster inside a dungeon. Li Jihai confirms that this is true. Shinhian says he is getting a strange feeling. Li Jihai doesn't quite understand, but begins explaining that dungeons started appearing on Earth 13 years ago, and millions have formed worldwide. She notes that there have been 0 recorded cases where more than one type of monster appeared in a single dungeon. Suddenly, a monster bird lands on high ground but is swiftly taken down by another creature, and a gigantic monster bird rises and roars. The sky is clear, and beneath it, a man is feeding fish while sitting near a lake inside the villa of the Twilight Guild's leader, Park Tae-hoon. Park Tae-hoon's subordinate approaches from behind and calls out to him. He reports that they have received news about the Dawn Guild's vice leader, Li Jihai, who has been acting unusually. The subordinate, Kim Chul-ho, adds that Li Jihai has been seen fully supporting a newcomer who has not even been registered with the association for a long time. He further reports that she has been going on dungeon raids together with this newcomer. While feeding the fish, Park Tae-hoon calmly confirms if Li Jihai really did that and asks for more details. Kim Chul-ho explains that according to their investigation, the newbie who has received Li Jihai's support is the older brother of team leader Cha Yunseal, who belongs to the Dawn Guild. Kim Chul-ho identifies the newcomer as Cha Shinhian and adds that there is something unusual about him. He disappeared for 14 years and reappeared only recently. Reading from his report, Kim Chul-ho adds that when Cha Shinhian reappeared, the Dawn Guild's director, Seo Kanjin, went missing shortly after. Park Tae-hoon raises his hand, signaling him to stop, and asks where Cha Shinhian had been for those 14 years. Kim Chul-ho flips through his documents in a panic, admitting that their intelligence team could not obtain that information, but adds that Seo Kanjin, after discovering something, immediately disappeared without retiring. Park Tae-hoon adjusts his hat while Kim Chul-ho continues his report, explaining that Director Seo Kanjin had gone to Cha Yunseal's house to avenge the death of his son. Park Tae-hoon finishes his sentence, saying that Seo Kanjin must have died, placing his hat down. Startled, Kim Chul-ho nervously asks what he means. Park Tae-hoon repeats that Seo Kanjin has probably died. With a faint smile, Park Tae-hoon remarks that Cha Shinhian might have killed Seo Kanjin and calls him a rascal, wondering if he came from Urim. Meanwhile, Shinhian is inside a dungeon, fighting the monster birds. The dungeon is in chaos. Shinhian stands amidst the destruction, one hand radiating red fire and the other emitting blue cold energy. He cheerfully admits that it feels different from using the wind palm technique. Just as Li Jihai begins to speak, Shinhian turns toward her. She tells him that she knows he is enjoying himself after learning a new skill, but reminds him that an hour has already passed. She adds that she has a feeling his MP has not decreased at all and warns that at this rate, he might destroy the entire dungeon. Shinhian realizes the situation and, deep in thought, wonders how to explain the feeling. He then asks if the wizard skills she gave him also include the life force reversal technique. Li Jihai confirms and explains that it's an emergency skill that allows the user to exchange their life force for magic power. She then asks what is troubling him. Shinhian begins to explain that in Urim, once a person reaches level 35 in both external and internal arts, they can achieve an ethereal body, which allows them to use their powers endlessly. When one reaches level 40 in external arts, they obtain youth revitalization, enabling them to continuously sustain their ultimate life force. If the user has infinite power, Then they also possess endless life force. By using life force reversal in that state, they can generate infinite magic power. As Shinhian keeps mumbling in deep explanation, Li Jiahai starts to feel mentally drained. Suddenly realizing he has been rambling without noticing, Shinhian quickly summarizes that it's all about infinite origin flow, meaning that even if different martial arts exist, once someone reaches their ultimate realm, they all converge into one. Clenching his fist into his palm, Shinhian says that what he means is that there's nothing one cannot achieve if they attain the highest level of martial arts. Li Jiahai skeptically asks if such a thing is even possible. Shinhian jumps forward, saying that he will take care of the smaller monsters first before facing the boss. Li Jiahai wonders about the boss battle and thinks to herself that Shinhian's words carry both meaning and intent. Calling herself an idiot in her thoughts, she realizes she had been worrying too much about the boss when it was simply another monster, and if that's true, then the Sun Emperor is nothing to fear. From afar, a monster bird dives toward Li Jiahai, but she swiftly strikes it down with her dagger, thinking she should find a way to make a living from her skills. The dungeon's sky swarms with monster birds, and Li Jiahai takes them down midair with her dagger. As she descends, she drives her dagger into a nearby wall, using it to anchor herself and hang on. She exhales deeply, acknowledging how high up she is, then immediately leaps downward, taking down several monster birds on her way before landing gracefully on the ground. As she looks downward, she notices a large number of monster birds below. She wonders aloud how long it will take them to finish off all these monsters. Gathering energy above her hand, she thinks that if she returns, she needs to increase the dungeon's danger level. She notes that there are far more monsters here than she was told, and since they can fly, they are even harder to deal with. She starts thinking about what the ideal raid composition would be. In her mind, a 5-person team should include a defender, mage, shooter, priest, and 1 close combat fighter. But suddenly, something catches her attention, making her freeze in place. A gigantic purple monster flies above her. As she looks up, she realizes that there are not just one, but several massive purple creatures soaring in the sky. She stutters in shock, wondering what these beings are. One of them lets out a powerful roar. Li Jiahai, startled by their sheer size, begins to think about how it's even possible for 2 types of monsters to exist in the same dungeon. As one of the enormous creatures attacks her, she leaps aside to dodge, but the monster quickly closes in on her midair. When it opens its mouth to strike, Li Jiahai flinches and swings her dagger, muttering in frustration that these monsters are truly annoying. She glances back at the creature and sees it surrounding itself with a red energy aura before launching an attack with its wings. Li Jiahai narrowly avoids the hit, stunned to witness the monster using demonic power. She realizes that this is not just an unusual occurrence, but evidence that the entire dungeon system has gone out of balance. The gigantic monster roars again, but before it can advance, Shinhian appears and strikes it down, stopping it in its tracks. Li Jiahai freezes momentarily, shocked by his sudden arrival. Shinhian seems amused by the appearance of these enormous creatures. Holding Li Jiahai securely in his arms while flying through the air, she asks if he had sensed these monsters before. Smiling confidently, Shinhian replies that he already mentioned the boss. He explains that when he first scanned the dungeon with his key senses, he detected the presence of these strange beings as well. Li Jiahai quickly asks if he ignored their existence earlier and allowed them to roam freely. He calmly answers that he was waiting for them to show up at the end, as it's normal to leave the boss for last. He tells Li Jiahai that he knows how concerned she has been, even freezing up from worry, but adds that he's well aware of her strength and that she's more than capable of handling herself. He advises her to stay calm, and Li Jiahai quietly listens. After setting her down on the ground, he remarks that they haven't eaten for quite some time, then playfully tells her to choose their menu and asks if she prefers fried food or grilled food. Narrowing her brows, Li Jiahai insists that they shouldn't take the situation lightly. Shinhian raises both hands, gathering flame energy in one and golden lightning energy in the other. Clenching his fists, he smirks with determination. With focused eyes, he declares to the gigantic monsters that he has been waiting for them. The colossal creatures roar in response, facing him head-on, while Shinhian stands firm before them, power surging in both of his hands, ready for battle. Li Jihai stands still, observing the gigantic monsters being taken down above her. She sighs, wondering about the situation. Reaching out to Shinhian through her internal link, she asks if he can hear her and thinks to herself that he was supposed to be using magic. Yet right now he is only using his fists to send the gigantic monsters flying. Shinhian, confused by her words, tells her that he is using magic while clenching his fists tightly. Li Jihai reluctantly agrees, though still unsure. Suddenly, she looks upward and freezes as she sees a massive gate forming in the middle of the air. From it, gigantic monsters emerge one after another, roaring and growling fiercely. Li Jihai immediately warns Shinhian to watch out. Shinhian, however, floats calmly in the air, showing no sign of fear. Li Jihai leaps from one spot to another, thinking about the impossible sight before her, the appearance of gigantic monsters through a gate inside a dungeon. She grows increasingly worried about Shinhian and senses how dangerous the situation has become. From high above, she watches as Shinhian becomes surrounded by countless small and gigantic monsters. She shouts for him to dodge. Reaching out to him mentally again, she asks if he can hear her. Crossing her daggers in an X formation, she tells him telepathically that she will create an opening for him to escape immediately. The gigantic monster's eyes glow a menacing red as Li Jihai sends out her attacks toward them. Shinhian becomes engulfed by a swarm of monsters and disappears from sight. Some of the creatures fall after being struck by Li Jihai's attacks, but she wonders aloud if defeating the smaller monsters will even make a difference. She calls out to Shinhian again, standing on the ground and looking up at the sky filled with monsters. Analyzing the battle, she realizes that the smaller creatures are not moving on their own. They're being controlled by the larger ones. She notices that every time she aims for a large monster, the smaller ones throw themselves in the way, willingly taking the hits. Li Jihai concludes that the fight will not end until all the large monsters are eliminated, and she begins strategizing how to reach them. She looks toward the massive horde ahead, wondering if Shinhian is all right. Remembering how their eyes met earlier, she wonders if he avoided her gaze on purpose. She sighs, admitting to herself that she will never truly understand what he is thinking, and worries if communicating with him through voice transmission might be straining him. Concerned, she says softly that she has seen similar abnormalities occur before, and that no matter how strong Shinhian is, the situation can still turn dangerous. She resolves to help him, but realizes she can't approach him easily since he's floating high in the air. Just then, she spots a monster flying above her. Jumping onto its back, Li Jihai wonders if the monster is targeting Shinhian and notices that it hasn't detected her presence. She thinks that this way, she can reach Shinhian without being noticed. She hopes Shinhian is doing fine and focuses on dealing with the abnormal monsters emitting a strange, unsettling aura. Suddenly, another monster attacks her from behind, knocking her off balance. As she falls, she clenches her daggers tightly and looks downward. When she nears another monster, she strikes with one of her daggers at the monster to stop her fall, hanging from it to steady herself. The monster roars at her, and Li Jihai smirks, saying that it's finally paying attention to her. Releasing her dagger, she descends toward a massive monster, thinking that she can handle it as long as it's one-on-one. The large monster opens its jaws wide, but Li Jihai confidently thinks that no monster can match her. She activates her skill, Shadow Dance, swinging her daggers while saying, "Open," as she unleashes a powerful strike toward the creature. However, she quickly notices a huge number of smaller monsters rushing toward her, commanded by the large one. Li Jihai wonders how she can possibly defeat such an overwhelming number of enemies. Suddenly, a beam of light bursts from behind her, and her eyes widen in shock. Shinhian's blue energy radiates outward, engulfing all the surrounding monsters. The light grows intense, filling the air around them, and Li Jihai covers her face, closing her eyes as the brilliant energy from Shinhian illuminates the entire dungeon. She is stunned and wonders if he has executed a blade of strength without any external source of power, noting that he is using his air-burst sword to control multiple blades simultaneously. This makes her question if he has reached the state of an ethereal body. Shinhian is surrounded by countless blades hovering above him. He calmly says that the hunter roleplay he's been doing is about to end soon. Extending his hand forward, all of his blades shoot ahead, targeting the monsters in the distance. The monsters begin to fall one after another as soon as the blades strike them. They keep collapsing, the entire area becomes illuminated by the light of Shinhian's blades, while the monsters roar and groan in defeat. From a high vantage point, Li Jihai observes the fallen monsters scattered across the ground. She thinks to herself that Shinhian has managed to settle the situation with remarkable ease, but then realizes that there's a bigger problem. She begins to wonder if similar occurrences are happening in other dungeons as well. She reflects that the system currently determines which hunters are qualified to clear dungeons based on danger levels. However, she worries whether that system is sufficient to handle the appearance of these abnormal monsters and mysterious gates. Narrowing her eyes, she thinks that under such conditions, an entire party could be wiped out in an instant. The Sun Festival, she realizes, is no longer the top priority. They first need to investigate this phenomenon thoroughly. Li Jihai starts to think about Park Tae-hoon, knowing he would never miss an opportunity if her attention were diverted elsewhere. If she doesn't stay alert, the Twilight Guild could bring down her guild instantly. She begins weighing her options when suddenly, Shinhian appears before her holding a glowing blue stone. Startled, she asks what he's doing. Shinhian responds by asking where her mind has wandered off to and explains that he's been asking her about the stone, as it looks different from the others. Realizing what he means, Li Jihai examines the stone closely and tells him that he's obtained a monster skill stone, adding that he's hit the jackpot. She explains that since he defeated a large monster, he was rewarded with a rare skill stone. Shinhian clenches the stone tightly in his fist, while Li Jihai sighs softly, murmuring about the power of the large monster. After calling out to Shinhian, Li Jihai tells him that there's something important she needs to share with him. A month later, a group of people gather to discuss the upcoming Sun Festival. One of them asks if anyone has seen the participant roster. Another responds that he has and says he can't wait for the event to begin. A third man mentions that he didn't recognize many names on the list, but points out that Cha Shinhian has recently been trending online. Another adds that it hasn't even been a month since Shinhian registered as a hunter. Nearby, Kim Chulho sits on a bench, sweating nervously as he looks up toward a tall building and mutters that he's in serious trouble. Inside the Twilight Guild's executive emergency meeting, a man shouts angrily that Cha Shinhian has been chosen as the Dawn Guild's savior and demands to know why Kim Chulho couldn't even determine where Shinhian had been for the past 14 years, let alone identify his level or class. Standing before the executives, Kim Chulho can only bow his head and mumble an apology. Park Tae-hoon calls out to Director Park, who panics slightly as he addresses him respectfully as guild leader. Park Tae-hoon tells him to sit down, and the director obeys hesitantly. With a faint smile, Park Tae-hoon remarks that the Dawn Guild seems to be growing restless. Standing up, he adds that it feels as though they made their selection too early for it to truly be considered their trump card. He continues, explaining that only when all cards are revealed can they determine whether it's a bluff or a jackpot. Smirking, Park Tae-hoon concludes by saying that they simply need to remove the root of the conflict. At the cafe, Kim Chulho feels uneasy as he glances at his watch, waiting for someone to arrive. When the person finally appears, Kim Chulho quickly stands up, waves his hand, and calls him over. As the man approaches, Kim Chulho greets him warmly, thanking him for accepting his invitation, and addresses him as Cha Shinhian. Shinhian appears in a neatly fitted suit and quietly observes Kim Chulho. Kim Chulho extends his hand for a handshake, nervously wiping his sweat with a handkerchief at the same time. Shinhian does not respond immediately, causing Kim Chulho to call his name. Snapping out of his thoughts, Shinhian finally shakes his hand. Shinhian asks if he is Kim Chulho from the Twilight Guild and recalls that Yuniel once told him to fix the way he speaks, as his tone often sounds too informal and rude. Kim Chulho confirms his identity and says that he is happy to meet him, though internally, he finds Shinhian rather impolite. Kim Chulho starts sweating again, thinking that it would be nice to expose Shinhian's true personality. However, he reminds himself that his role today is simply to gather as much information about Shinhian as possible. As he begins to speak about why he invited him, Kim Chulho suddenly interrupts himself and hurriedly starts searching through his bag. Watching him fumble around, Shinhian wonders if there is any need to even check the Twilight Guild when they have people this absent-minded. Finally, Kim Chulho places a small device on the table. Shinhian looks at it curiously, and Kim Chulho explains that it's a magic tool known as a sound insulation device. When its button is pressed, it creates a barrier that blocks out all external noise. Shinhian watches the blue curtain form around them, slightly amazed, while Kim Chulho adds that their voices also won't leak outside, making it perfect for private conversations. Shinhian smirks and repeats the words, "private conversation." Kim Chulho then asks if Shinhian wasn't expecting something like this when he agreed to meet. Getting straight to the point, Kim Chulho says that the Twilight Guild wants to form a partnership with the Limitless Guild, essentially a direct alliance between Cha Shinhian and the Twilight Guild. Shinhian, unsurprised, thinks to himself that he had already anticipated something like this. He calmly asks Kim Chulho if he didn't see his Sun Festival entry, as he is already cooperating with the Dawn Guild. Kim Chulho begins to sweat again as he replies that their guild is aware of that. He adds that they also know he has received considerable support from the Dawn Guild, and that there were hidden circumstances surrounding the incident involving Director Seo Kongjin. He further explains that they have looked into all of Shinhian's dungeon raids with Li Jiahai, the vice leader of the Dawn Guild. Despite all that, Shinhian hasn't officially joined the Dawn Guild. Instead, he has formed a one-man guild and entered a cooperative agreement with them. Adjusting his glasses, Kim Chulho says that they have identified a gap in the relationship between Shinhian and the Dawn Guild. He then requests that Shinhian join them, assuring him that the Twilight Guild can offer far more than the Dawn Guild ever could. Shinhian smirks as he takes a sip of his tea. He admits internally that Kim Chulho is sharper than he initially thought and decides to take back his earlier judgment of him. He acknowledges that Kim Chulho's insight is impressive, and it's difficult to argue against his reasoning. Kim Chulho flips through his documents and begins explaining the definitive terms and application details of the partnership. However, Shinhian cuts him off mid-sentence, saying that he doesn't need to hear any of it. Rising from his seat, he says that he only came to find out what Kim Chulho wanted from him, but now realizes it was a waste of time. He straightforwardly rejects the proposal while waving his hand and begins to leave. Kim Chulho starts to panic, wondering aloud how Shinhian could reject his offer before he even had the chance to make a proper proposal. In a rush, he blurts out that if Shinhian would consider withdrawing from the Sun Festival, the Twilight Guild could compensate him however he wanted. But Shinhian simply replies that he owes a debt to Li Jiahai, and that he hates losing. Kim Chulho tries to stop him as he walks away, internally lamenting that he still has so much to say. He calls out Shinhian's name, but before he can continue, a nearby man wearing a mask speaks up, asking Kim Chulho how long he plans to keep staring into the distance. Kim Chulho freezes, instantly recognizing the masked man as his guild leader. Park Tae-hoon holds Kim Chulho from behind while adjusting the microphone placed on him. He says that he knows he told him to prolong the conversation as much as possible, otherwise, all his eavesdropping efforts would have gone to waste. Kim Chulho apologizes and calls Shinhian a rude person. Park Tae-hoon, while walking away, casually shrugs it off and says that Shinhian seems somewhat strange, wondering about his true identity. Later, Li Jiahai is on a phone call, listening attentively to what Shinhian is saying. He tells her that Park Tae-hoon must be very upset and probably suspects that he is from Urim. However, the name Supreme Sword Emperor isn't widely known. He adds that the moment he entered the cafe, he sensed Park Tae-hoon raising his outer key, which confirms that Li Jiahai's prediction was correct. Li Jiahai praises Shinhian's work, saying that Park Tae-hoon is the kind of person who dislikes things going differently from his expectations. Shinhian assures her that he won't cause any more trouble for a while and asks about the dungeon investigation. Li Jiahai thanks him, saying that because of his efforts, they haven't received any reports of strange phenomena since they cleared that dungeon, at least for now. She expresses her gratitude again, saying that if it weren't for him taking over the Buchan Bird dungeon investigation, she would have worked herself to exhaustion. Shinhian asks if there's anything else he needs to do, and Li Jiahai replies that there isn't. She points out that he sounds grim and asks if everything is fine, but he stays silent. Yuniel then walks up and asks her brother if he's done talking, then tells him to go, her expression filled with sadness. Shinhian puts his phone down, acknowledging her, thinking that nothing more can be done. Both of them head to the memorial hall where their parents' ashes are kept. Placing her hand on their family picture, Yuniel begins to sob, telling her parents that her brother has finally returned. Shinhian stands quietly behind her, thinking to himself that coming here was a bad idea. He admits internally that he has changed too much from the person he used to be, so much that he can no longer shed a single tear in front of his parents' ashes. He believes that showing his inhuman side would only bring more pain to Yuniel. Yuniel looks at him with worry and asks if he doesn't feel anything at all, but Shinhian keeps walking silently. She says that he doesn't look sad or even slightly moved, but he remains quiet. Clenching her fists, she steps closer and asks why he isn't saying a single word, which only makes her believe that what she just said was true. Shinhian apologizes softly, thinking that he can no longer hide it. He tells Yuniel that he has become someone who can't show her what she wants to see. Yuniel grits her teeth and shouts at him, asking if he even realizes how strange he has become. She demands to know why he's apologizing, and what he thinks it is that she truly wants from him. She tries to express what she really wants for him, recalling their past, but stops midway. Instead, she asks why he has changed so much, telling him that he has been acting cold and distant. Shinhian looks toward her silently. Yuniel says that she can't even tell if he is really her brother anymore. She admits that a lot of time has passed, so it's natural that he wouldn't be the same person, but she adds that she doesn't care. As she walks past him, she says that she has lived alone just fine until now. Shinhian remains silent as Yuniel walks away, thinking to himself that he shouldn't have come here. He recalls his time in Murim, where he had faced countless battles and taken down many opponents. He reflects on the question Yuniel asked about his change in behavior and realizes that he wants to know the answer too. Why has he changed so much? Suddenly, a Murim status window appears behind him with the word "Why" written on it. Recognizing the window, Shinhian stares at it, confused as to why it has appeared here. The system then asks if he still wants to maintain the form of a human and addresses him by name, Cha Shinhian.